Do you feel you're at a disadvantage without having a spouse by being a bachelor, which is pretty rare in U.S. politics? Yeah, I think I'd be the first bachelor in 100 years. I think America is ready for this if I'm qualified to lead the nation. Many people who follow American politics know Lindsey Graham as one of the most recognizable and outspoken voices in the United States Senate. But very few have ever seen the private place he calls home or understood the quieter life he has built away from the cameras. Behind the loud debates, the television appearances, and the relentless pace of Washington, there is a different side to this man that rarely surfaces in the news cycle. Tucked away from the cameras and the press briefings, this is where the longtime senator relaxes, recharges, and returns to the version of himself that existed long before any of the national attention arrived. The home itself tells a story of comfort and deliberate privacy. So what is this place really like? And what does it reveal about his private side when the microphones are finally turned off? Lindsey Graham's Seneca home. In a quiet little town called Seneca, life moves at a slower and more forgiving pace than almost anywhere else in America. It is the kind of place where people argue about college football rivalries and local high school games rather than foreign policy and budget negotiations. Seneca sits in the upstate corner of South Carolina, sometimes called the Golden Corner of the state, set among clear lakes, rolling hills, and long two-lane roads lined with pine trees. It feels genuinely far away from the bright lights and relentlessly busy studios of Washington, where Lindsey Graham spends a considerable portion of his professional life. That geographic and psychological distance matters more than people might initially assume. When people search online for where Lindsey Graham lives, they often arrive expecting to find a sprawling mansion with gated grounds and the kind of visible excess popular culture associates with powerful politicians. The truth is considerably simpler. According to his official Senate biography, Graham maintains his residence in Seneca, South Carolina. The biography states this clearly and without any suggestion of mystery. Once that basic fact is established, many of the rumors that circulate online begin to lose their structural foundation. If the town itself is openly disclosed, why would the life conducted inside it require concealment? Search results frequently surface phrases like Lindsey Graham Seneca House or Lindsey Graham Home in South Carolina. But search terms are not the same thing as answers. Seneca is not simply a coordinate on a map selected for strategic obscurity. It has its own distinct rhythm. It is the kind of town where people recognize your vehicle from a distance and call you by your first name before you have finished parking. Privacy in a community like this is maintained less through physical barriers and more through the social fabric of mutual respect and long-standing familiarity. Graham's decades-long connection to upstate South Carolina explains why a small town like this continues to function as a genuine safe harbor even after years navigating the most public form of professional life American democracy produces. Public reporting has described the basic physical facts of his living arrangements well enough to draw a clear picture. Around the period of the 2016 presidential campaign, multiple reports confirmed that Graham maintained two separate residences, a ranch-style house in Seneca that had been his home base for many years, and a townhouse in Washington, D.C. that served the practical demands of his Senate responsibilities. That dual arrangement tells you something important about how his life is structured. Seneca is his personal home base, where the rhythms of ordinary daily life operate. Washington is his professional base, where politics, votes, and cameras create an environment that never fully powers down. Reports place the Seneca property at approximately 1,900 square feet, comfortable without being ostentatious. His Washington townhouse was smaller still, a modest two-bedroom property purchased in the late 1990s. Neither property reflects the kind of visible luxury that generates tabloid coverage. Both reflect the practical priorities of someone whose life requires maintaining a functional presence in two very different places at once. A modest ranch house does not announce drama or mystery. It suggests routine. A key on a hook near the door, a refrigerator opened after a late return from a long flight, a porch light programmed to turn on regardless of whether its owner is home or still somewhere over the eastern seaboard. This is where the internet's restless appetite for narrative tends to generate more heat than light. Official biographies address careers thoroughly, but remain largely silent on personal life. Graham's Senate biography emphasizes his legislative work, his military service, his roots in South Carolina. Sources like Encyclopedia Britannica catalog his electoral history and policy positions. They do not center a spouse, children, or a conventional family narrative because none of those things exist in his biography to be centered. Seneca therefore becomes more than a location, and the house becomes more than a structure. Both transform in the internet's imagination into a projection screen, where theories get constructed and circulated as if construction were the same as confirmation. The actual facts remain clearer and less dramatic. We know where he lives. We know the basic shape of the arrangement. The explanation may be genuinely simple: privacy, comfort, and a loyalty to the place that formed him. Lindsey Graham's personal life. Unlike many public figures who integrate spouses and families openly into their public identities, Graham's public biography communicates very little about romance. The most direct explanation comes from his own memoir, published under the title My Story. In it, he states openly that he never married. The reason he offers is not complicated. Life moved in one direction, and timing consistently worked against building a lasting romantic partnership. He describes himself as a longtime bachelor who dated at various points and arrived at moments where marriage seemed like a genuine possibility. He acknowledges a period when he seriously considered proposing. The proposal never happened. The relationship did not survive the pressures of the life he was building. Either the right person never quite materialized, or the right person could not be accommodated within the schedule and demands of a career in national politics. His explanation is direct and coherent. It is not a story constructed to conceal something more complicated. It is the story of a man whose professional trajectory moved consistently forward while his personal trajectory followed a different course. Online culture tends to treat a powerful, unmarried man as a puzzle requiring a hidden solution. When a public figure does not appear at events with a spouse, does not share family photographs, and does not discuss romance in interviews, people begin constructing explanations from the available absence. A missing detail becomes a deliberate clue. Why does contemporary culture treat a bachelor as a mystery requiring a solution rather than simply as a person who has lived differently? Even the most basic reference sources tell the same uncomplicated story. Wikipedia notes that Graham has never married and has no children, and that he had relationships earlier in life, with marriage a consideration he once took seriously. That detail matters because it establishes that romantic interest was not foreign to his life. He dated. He formed serious attachments. He reached moments where permanence seemed possible. He ultimately did not pursue it, and he has consistently maintained that his personal life is his own. That choice of privacy tends to accelerate curiosity rather than satisfy it, and search results frequently lead to confident claims built on thin foundations. The important distinction that gets blurred is the one between something not publicly confirmed and something privately confirmed but hidden. Those are genuinely different categories, and collapsing them produces conclusions the evidence does not support. His hometown plays an active role in the quiet character of his personal life. Seneca is a small community where life moves at a pace that makes Washington's intensity feel like a different country. Quiet residential streets, neighbors who have known each other for years, a strong faith community, and the particular quality of a place where someone can exist as themselves rather than as a public figure to be observed. Graham has maintained his connection to Seneca through the entirety of his national career, a period during which many politicians shed their home communities as Washington's gravitational pull increased. He did not shed Seneca. He returned to it consistently and maintained the same physical home there across the years in a way that reflects genuine attachment rather than strategic positioning. His Washington property, the smaller brick townhouse purchased in the late 1990s, serves a fundamentally different function from the Seneca ranch house. It is a professional base rather than a personal home, designed for someone whose work requires sustained presence in the Capitol during legislative sessions. The two properties together tell a more complete story than either tells alone. A life built around intentional movement between two distinct environments that serve genuinely different purposes. A house between two worlds. Washington residences belonging to long-serving senators tend to develop a particular character over time. Efficient rather than comfortable, organized around a schedule that rarely permits genuine relaxation. The Washington townhouse functions as a command post, a place to change clothes, review briefing materials, take a few hours of sleep between late votes and early hearings, and prepare for the sustained performance national political life requires. It is built for motion rather than the accumulation of ordinary domestic details. Seneca operates on an entirely different principle. The ranch house there carries the accumulated weight of years of personal history in a specific community, permitting the pace of life to slow below the threshold Washington maintains as its permanent operating condition. The tension between these two environments is readable in how people discuss the Seneca property online. Some construct it as a sanctuary removed from political chaos. Others frame it as a mysterious location concealing something the public has not been permitted to see. The more accurate picture is less dramatic. A modest house in a small South Carolina town that has served as a consistent personal home base for a politician whose professional life has kept him in constant motion between two very different places for decades. The stability of the Seneca residence across that period is itself a form of information. Transience characterizes the Washington life. Rootedness characterizes the South Carolina life. Relationships require time allocated to them rather than to professional demands, a predictable domestic routine, and the capacity to be genuinely present rather than physically adjacent while mentally occupied by the next vote or crisis. National politics provides almost none of these conditions reliably. It rewards the person who can subordinate everything else to the demands of the work. A profile from a Los Angeles Times that described Graham's two residences as long-held and steady rather than temporary suggests a person who has organized life around stability in physical location, even while professional demands create perpetual motion everywhere else. In 2024, the sense of privacy that Seneca had provided for years was disrupted in a way that illustrated how thoroughly modern political life can reach even the most deliberately private domestic spaces. On the 4th of July, an organized protest arrived outside the senator's home in Seneca, connected to groups opposing Graham's strong public support for Israel during the conflict in Gaza, a position he had articulated repeatedly in Senate floor speeches and media appearances. The protesters brought signs and chants to a residential street on a national holiday, a juxtaposition that felt almost deliberately theatrical against the backyard barbecues and fireworks that typically define the day. Graham responded publicly through local media, affirming his respect for the right to peaceful protest, apologizing to his neighbors for the disruption to their holiday, and making clear the demonstration would have no effect on his policy positions regarding Israel. The reaffirmation of his stance was the substantive center of the statement. The rest provided the diplomatic framing. The event illustrated something about modern political life that transcends the specific policy disagreement. There's essentially no physical location that functions as genuinely private for a high-profile national figure. The home address, once known primarily to the immediate community, becomes accessible in ways that let organized groups translate political disagreement into physical presence at someone's residence. The quiet town that had functioned as a buffer between the senator and Washington's intensity became, that afternoon, an extension of the national political conversation he had been having in Washington. The invisible political partner. The arrival of organized protest at his private residence illustrates that for a politician of his prominence, the concept of a space genuinely removed from professional demands is functionally limited, regardless of distance from Washington. According to reporting from the time, the demonstration was organized in response to Graham's consistently stated support for Israel and his opposition to restrictions on U.S. military assistance to the Israeli government. One account connected the protest to the Party for Socialism and Liberation, describing it as a deliberate targeting of Graham's home address to make the political personal. The choice of location was not incidental. Bringing the demonstration to a residential address rather than a Senate office building was itself a statement about the relationship between public positions and private life. Graham's response communicated something beyond the policy reaffirmation at its center. The apology to his neighbors recognized that his presence in their community creates a form of collateral exposure they did not choose. His acknowledgement reflected an awareness of the community relationship his long residence in Seneca has created. A sitting senator, a holiday devoted to national celebration, a quiet town removed from Washington's intensity, and a demonstration about U.S. foreign policy arriving at a private residential address. Every element of the American political identity his career represents seemed to converge on that single street that afternoon. This episode reframes the question of partnership beyond simple romantic curiosity. When the private sphere is continuously subject to penetration by the demands of professional life, the nature of what would constitute a genuine partner becomes more complex than whether a romantic relationship exists. The consistent companion in Graham's daily existence is not a person who shares his Seneca home. It is the permanent presence of political consequence that follows him from the Senate chamber to the television studio to the residential street where he has maintained his home for decades. Ambition as a partner. Consider the actual biographical arc. Decades of public service across the legislative halls of Washington and the quieter corners of upstate South Carolina. A professional life shaped by military service in the Judge Advocate General's Corps, years in the House before the Senate, presidential campaigns that tested his national viability, and committee positions that placed him at the center of consequential policy decisions for years at a time. For some observers, the absence of a romantic partner represents an incompleteness. For another reading, the career itself has functioned as the constant companion, the organizing presence around which everything else has been arranged. His persistent connection to Seneca provides an important data point. As his national profile grew, he did not redirect his primary identification toward Washington. He maintained his anchor in the upstate South Carolina community where he grew up. The Seneca House is not merely a property he continues to own. It is a symbol of a continuous relationship with a specific place and community that has persisted across the full arc of his public life. The biographical pattern is legible across the public record. No confirmed romantic partner, no spouse, no children, yet a consistent and sustained return to the same place, the same community, the same professional mission. When a commitment of that kind maintains itself across decades without deviation, it begins to function less like a career in the ordinary sense, and more like a primary bond that organizes everything else around it. Ambition at the level national political careers require is not a passive quality. It follows you home the way romantic partnerships follow people home, occupying mental and emotional space that would otherwise be available for connection, and requiring total commitment in a way that leaves limited room for the ordinary domestic availability sustaining romantic relationships typically requires. This does not mean romance was entirely absent from his adult life. He had relationships. He considered marriage seriously at least once by his own account. The circumstances that might have allowed a lasting partnership to develop alongside the career did not organize themselves in a way that made both possible simultaneously. The career moved forward. The romantic possibilities did not become permanent. His life found a different organizing structure than the conventional one, with public service becoming the long-term commitment around which everything else was arranged. The pattern has roots reaching back to his early life in central South Carolina, a small community not unlike Seneca. While still a teenager, Graham lost both of his parents within a short period of each other, a loss that arrived at a moment when his younger sister Darlene still needed someone to provide stability. The responsibility for his sister's well-being fell to him when most of his peers were focused on their own immediate futures. He managed the demands of keeping a household functional, ensuring his sister could complete her education, and navigating financial realities that had arrived without warning. Early responsibility at that scale rewires the relationship between desire and duty in ways that do not simply dissolve as circumstances change. When adulthood arrives through crisis rather than gradual accumulation, certain priorities become embedded as foundational rather than optional. The question stops being, "What do I want?" and becomes, "What must be done?" A person formed early by the necessity of carrying weight alone tends to organize their subsequent life around structure, purpose, and a clear sense of direction. Those qualities served Graham's political career extraordinarily well. Whether they serve the development of a lasting romantic partnership equally well is a different question with a less certain answer. The House in Seneca, the career in the Senate, the return to South Carolina across decades of national political life, the early responsibility for a younger sister, the military service before politics, the sustained public commitment to positions held consistently enough to generate protest at a private residential address on a national holiday. All of these are pieces of a coherent picture. It is not a picture that centers a hidden romantic partner or a concealed domestic life. It is the picture of a person whose primary bonds have been with a place, a community, a professional mission, and a set of responsibilities that arrived early and never fully released their claim on his sense of who he is and what he owes. So what are your thoughts on Lindsey Graham's private life and the choices that have shaped it? Share your perspective with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more in-depth explorations of the lives behind the public figures.